Welcome to Crypto Sapiens, a show that hosts lively discussions with innovative Web3 builders to help you learn about decentralized money systems, including Ethereum, Bitcoin, and DeFi. The podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and it is not financial advice. Crypto Sapiens is presented in partnership with Bankless DAO, a movement for pioneers seeking freedom from the limitations of the traditional financial system. Bankless DAO will help the world go bankless by creating user-friendly on-ramps for people to discover decentralized financial technologies through education, media, and culture. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Crypto Sapiens. Today, we welcome Tamer, co-founder of streetwear brand Jobedu and artist behind the NFT community project Ego's Paradise. We talk with him about building authentic, multicultural communities, what it means to be an entrepreneur in Web3, and applying regenerative economics to digital and physical projects. There's lots to unpack in this episode, so without further ado, let's get started.
I guess it's the question of when Web3 starts when you get when you start building your moral compass. Really, when you start knowing what are you doing, what are you giving back, and what are you building? And that question for me has always been at the back of my head. And starting in 2007, my high school friend and I, we wanted to create a brand, an energetic brand that youth in the region can relate to. We just to give you a little background, I'm from the Middle East. For the most part, we've been importing culture. And which is natural with Hollywood and the merchandising of Hollywood and Superman and Batman and all that. So in the 70s and the 80s, we grew up with Western culture to the extent where we really didn't pay much attention to our own. And that was disconnect. That created a very big disconnect between people in the region and where they live, the culture. The grass was always greener on the other side. So we came up with the idea of Jobedu, which manifested in T-shirts, but it was really an expression of local pop culture, and that's where our movement started, really, in 2007 in a street market, and with $4,000, we made 600 T-shirts with carrying 6 designs, and nobody knew us. Nobody knew what we stood for, but they could relate to the messages on the T-shirts. And it was one of the first times Arabic was on merchandise. It's very hard to think of it from other cultural perspectives. You know, like how come there wasn't any? There was no reason. It wasn't a social barrier. It was just never done because it was easier to sell No Fear T-shirts or Metallica T-shirts, and that's where our journey started. I would say it's Web3 was kind of the driving element, even though it didn't exist. But we set out Jobedu to build a community, and that's where our slogan came from: join the tribe. In this part of the world, being part of a tribe means a lot. It means that you belong to a certain the easiest way to show it is it could be a class. So a lot of people are born tribeless. Really, they're not really part of a big tribe. So we were the tribe that anybody could belong to. And you just needed to share an affinity to just what we called the veil of ignorance back then, and just without knowing, which is a concept that we borrowed from a very established philosopher. But the concept is, how would you act in a community if you did not know anything about the person you're dealing with, neither their gender nor their race, their social? How would you just deal with them as humans? And that's pretty much how we built the brand. The human element is extremely at the center of Jobedu. And if you talk to most people in the region, they'd say they feel Jobedu is that friend. And so the concept of Web3, when I came across it from Tamer and Shami and Ken, it was like a eureka moment, because it's a tech tool that builds on all the disconnected elements that we were doing in building a community, whether it's on Twitter, blah, blah, blah. But there was no single membership. There's no single validated ID that we could build this whole community around. And that was what was super exciting about building a gated community with Ego's Paradise.
Yeah, wow. You've mentioned so much there that I want to unpack. So you talked about importing culture, which I think is really interesting because we see even some of that happening in Web3, where there is like culture that's borrowed from other projects to kind of lean into that culture to try to drive some success. You know, you also see even some conversations, to be honest, in terms of like the types of representation that's happening in certain projects that may potentially give it a little bit more validation just because there's a culture associated to that, right? The creators of a project might say, oh, if we lean into that culture, even though it's not our culture, we are more likely to have success with this project because that group of individuals, that community really shows up strong, right?
I want to be an entrepreneur, but I'm not going to come up with an idea. So let me just get a franchise and I'll run a business based on your manual that you created, which is fine, I guess. A lot of people didn't get a chance to enter the other projects, but then they still have the FOMO, and it would be nice to see all these communities, how like different communities of a similar archetype merge or something. But
sorry, it's interesting you say that. I want before you get too far away from that, I did want to kind of just share a recent experience because you're talking about the franchise model, right? And you're talking about how you borrow from someone else's successful model and then you monetize that. There could be problems with that. One, you know, there could be no alignment between yourself, the founders of a project, and that model that you are imitating, 100%. Right? Which it could be dangerous ground to tread because then there's inconsistencies with, you know, the people who develop this project and what they intend to represent. They're not necessarily one and the same. The other is, you know, if you are monetizing off someone else's model, if there's similarities that are a little too close, both in terms of design, aesthetic, whatever,
definitely.
There could be issues where someone's like, oh, you know, honestly, because I'm thinking of like the funks, for example, right? The crypto funks, that was one example. The other would be like the reversed or mirrored punk or Bored Apes, where they were kind of facing the other way, right? But, you know, there may be models where they're not necessarily kind of either paying back or recognizing those projects beyond that.
To be honest, as much as it pissed me off throughout the years, everybody who copied our designs and fit, like we've been working with designers ever since we started, and that's the whole point, is every designer comes with different flavors that can showcase the same culture just from a different lens. Our work got stolen quite a bit and it pissed me off every time, but it also made the community stronger. If I look back, you know, every time someone stole our art, it was always the community that went after them saying this is the work of XYZ, and they all rallied around it, and you'd feel that they had felt more ownership of the brand, and every brand gets ripped off.
That's interesting you say that. Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Every brand gets ripped off, but it's part of the value. Supreme, a knockoff Supreme walking around is just as equally, it's creating as much PR as a real one. And that's why a lot of brands kind of allow some counterfeit to happen.
That's interesting. I don't necessarily know if that's true, but I'm going to just accept that for the fact that you're right. There's something to be said about just propagating the idea of that culture and the desire to want to be a part of that community.
Exactly. And it's so the whole ecosystem feeds off it, and the holders of the originals will benefit.
Yeah. So the other thing that you were talking about that I really kind of wanted to dive into before we just get so completely into the project, that you were talking about Web3 as a philosophy, right? Yeah. How you were implementing some of these ideals of Web3 without necessarily having a Web3 project, right? With Jobedu, right? Tell me a little bit about that and what that means to you in terms of Web3 as a philosophy. And like, what were some of the things that you were implementing in your project? And then how did that scale to the point that you got into Web3?
The concept of rewarding a community has always been in the back of our head. So we have a loyalty program. We have all sorts of things that because really, we always say this, we founded Jobedu, but we don't own Jobedu. The second we went public and it became part of the culture, we are just the caretakers of Jobedu. We're here to represent what the people have entrusted this brand to be. That's always been the driving philosophy on how we conducted our business anyways, is how do we put the community first? How do we build on it? That's why we had the crowdsourcing model for designs. That's how we built our ambassador network. It's always about how do we give more to the community. Web3 is all about connecting, ownership, and actually rewarding engagement. And to me, that was looking at all the tools that are already out there. I felt that this was something that we could build something extremely unique based on our experience. How do we reward a community on IRL or digitally with Web2?
Yeah, that's wonderful. So walk me through the early days of your new project and, kind of what the idea was behind that and kind of how the previous experience may have informed some of it too.
I was approached by Tamer, a longtime friend of mine and listener right now. And he was telling me, hey, listen, you draw, right? I say, yeah, I draw. And I was visiting them in the States, visiting my family in the States. And he's like, listen, we'll buy you a Wacom from Amazon while you're here. Doodle something. If we like it, he's a Bored Ape, and Shami, he trades. Let's do something together. They've already been trading and working on blockchain projects before I came into the picture. And naturally the idea became, what do I draw, really? You know what I mean? And I wanted it to be a very personal experience. So in a way, ego is me, but it's really a lot of people. It's just it represented my point, the point in time that I was in at the time, which is the need to have a support community to support me and not being alone as an entrepreneur. I don't know if that describes it well for now.
I like the word you used there. The words you used were ego is me, right? Like, I think that that's something that I've believed in my heart from the very beginning in terms of NFT as a model, was the idea of NFTs as our identity. There's a certain reflection, I think, that happens 100%. When we buy into NFT 100%. Projects. It's one of the reasons why I like the art to your project, because I think that it's representative of people, of a culture that can propagate those ideals and spread the kind of this Web3 ethos across a wider community, not necessarily kind of duplicating the same kind of art and design and aesthetics. Because you know what? Around the world, we all look and sound different. We're all human at the end of the day, 100%. But we look and sound different. We want to identify with something that we can reflect on and say, this is a little bit of me. Right. Yeah. So I really like that idea of ego is me and how that influenced maybe some of the design of it. So they like
the doodles and they're like, build on it. You can get to keep your Wacom, which was super exciting for me. And I started to draw all these renditions and variations. And I wanted to understand the space more as I was drawing. So I was reading all these articles, and it's so great. And it's amazing how fast the space was evolving. As I was drawing with ego, and we were talking about this as a team, the whole strategy for NFT communities kind of changed 4 times in the past 6 months, 7 months. Different kind of projects, different kind of strategies, and people exploring. And with every project, I'd go back to the drawing board and kind of infuse all those learnings into the variations that I'm drawing. And at the same time, bring some of the personal experience that I have as an entrepreneur into the drawings themselves. So in one way or the other, like, they're not directly there, but I can tell you in every iteration of ego, there's a piece of me.
Tell me a little bit about the model then. So we got a good sense, I think, of where you came from, kind of how that may have informed some of it. Certainly there's a piece of the identity to speak to there. Tell me a little bit about the project. I see here in my notes, Ego's Paradise is an NFT membership club for community shapers to connect and benefit from the collective rewards of supporting each other. What does that mean?
All right. So there was a lot of times where I needed to make a very big decision. And as many people as I talk to in my close, immediate circle, you'll always get some kind of mixed answer because everybody has a different vested interest, or they're kind of sick of hearing it. But there were times where I'd be traveling somewhere and I'd be all alone in a hotel room and I have a huge pitch the next day, and I really needed to vet it with someone that I could trust and feel someone, and that someone needs to be someone who's been in the same kind of situation that they can talk to me and kind of guide me through it because they've been through it, and then the next day they realize what they should have been thinking of. And I think the best people that to do this are people who've already been in such a situation, and that's what this community is going to be striving for, and how people benefit from each other. The kind of people that we're attracting, and I'm bringing in my Rolodex into Ego's Paradise, and I'm sure all and Ken and Shami, we're all doing it because throughout the years, we've surrounded ourselves with really informed people. And if these people can be a call away or a message away for a collection of entrepreneurs that really don't need to go through a lot of the stress alone, regardless of what the topic is, whether it is legal registration or what jurisdiction should I sign in, what any kind of problem that they feel they need to figure it out alone, they really don't need to figure it out alone. We're there to make whatever path they've chosen to deliver whatever dream they want to whatever community they've decided to solve a problem for that much easier for them to do.
So walk me through the idea of NFTs as membership, because I know this is something that I hear from a lot of different projects, but and I think that different projects are looking at membership very differently. And I think that there's probably even some areas of membership that are yet to be explored. Yeah. So tell me, what are your thoughts as NFTs as a membership, and maybe how does that, I guess, work within your project?
So the way we look at membership is it's pretty much exactly like a gym. The only thing is that we believe that every time you go to the gym, the value of the gym goes up by the act of simply you going to use the gym and validating that it's a gym that you want to go to. The only difference is that the value of your membership does not appreciate. And if you could sell it, you cannot gain from whatever sweat equity you've put into the gym. And that's the model we want to put into our membership. It's you're a member of this community. Whatever effort you put in, you're going to see it in the value of your membership itself. And if you feel like you've reaped all the value you can get, and you want to pass on the baton to someone else, you can do that, and you've been rewarded.
That's interesting. So you're saying that the NFTs capture a certain value, and that value is portable across different holders?
Yes, the holders are going to be whoever the holder is the beneficiary of being part of the community, and all the perks that we bring to the community, and the roadmap that we want to build together with the community. The collective work that we're all going to be putting in by just being present in the community, and discussing and mentoring each other and building that value. This is a membership that you can pass on. I'm part of a few WhatsApp groups for entrepreneurs that are amazing, are impeccable. We ask each other questions. We solve so many problems for each other on a whim, because we know that's the kind of support we need. But at the end of the day, it is a WhatsApp group. What this is adding more, it's legitimizing that there is more value happening from being part of this group.
Yeah, I hear you using the word entrepreneur quite a few times. What does that mean to you? And in terms of I guess how does that fit into your thought process for creating projects? And what do you think is missing for maybe more entrepreneurs to make a leap similar to yours?
So I'm pretty loose with the word entrepreneur. I've met entrepreneurs of all walks of life. I don't believe an entrepreneur is someone who founds a company and gets funding. That is someone who opened a supermarket around the corner is an entrepreneur. Anyone creating value for a customer or a community is an entrepreneur. Activists are entrepreneurs. Anyone that challenges the status quo is an entrepreneur. They see that everybody else is going through the same motions, and they're not accepting those motions on behalf of a community and doing something about it. And that road is extremely extremely lonely. Even if you have a team and you have all these supporters, at the end of the day, it is your own hero's journey. We find entrepreneurs inside companies. We call them intrapreneurs because we want to differentiate, but they're really entrepreneurs that are just sticking around because they believe in the cause. They believe that they're making a difference where they are. Those are the people that we want, people who are making a difference where they are.
Yeah, it's funny when you were just talking right now about entrepreneurship and the description of it. I was also kind of pulling up a new tab on my computer and doing a quick search because, to be honest, while I myself am an entrepreneur too, I don't think I've actually ever looked up the definition of what it is. So I was curious, and I was like, well, I've asked this question, and you're putting in so much thought into kind of defining that. I'm like, let me actually do the work and go out there and look what it is. And a lot of what you said was actually repeated there, but it's interesting that there's a little word here that it just kind of stands out. And I want to ask you a question about this because as someone who is an entrepreneur and someone who's thinking about entrepreneurship in the space, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Here's what I'm reading. It says entrepreneurship is the creation of the creation or extraction of economic value. And it goes on to continue describing things, right? So I'm curious your thoughts, right? Because I think you're right. I think a lot of us here in the Web3 space are entrepreneurs because a lot of us who are in the space, whether we are investing or not, we are creating value just really through our activity, through our contributions, through our participation in Web3 projects, right? Now, are we capturing some of that value? Maybe, maybe not, depending on the model of the DAO or the project in terms of how incentives are creating for their projects or for their community. So the one word that to me is kind of tricky here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, is the word extraction of value, right? I think personally, and I'll just kind of give my 2 cents here, my 2 gwei before I kind of open it up to you, is that what Web3 allows is for the retention of value, right? Versus the extraction of value. And I guess I'm talking about from a community member standpoint in terms of what they can do within
entrepreneurship is not just economic value. It is about social change. It is about community advancement. It is about enhancing human life. It doesn't have to have economic gains with it. I know a friend of mine who I would qualify as an entrepreneur. He started a project behind a mall. There was an empty plot of land, and he brought in the community and filled it with wheat. And the community, 9 months later, harvested the wheat, made flour, and gave it to, it was a year's worth supply to 4 families. He did not make any economic gain. 4 families got the utility. For 1 year, they had flour to make bread. He wasn't paid. He didn't own the land. It was just a plot of land that he put. To me, he's an entrepreneur.
Yeah, certainly. He created value for individuals and retained none of it, right? It really was about social.
It is about retaining value within a community.
I don't know how familiar you are with some of this vocabulary, but there's a word that gets thrown around more and more here in the Web3 space that I'm a huge fan of. And I think there's some projects that really kind of represent the ideals of this, and that's regenerative economics or just regenerative behavior. Regenerative would be the antithesis of degenerative, right? So I think for the most part, we may be more familiar with the shortened version of that, of degenerative, and that's degen. Right? There's a lot of degen behavior, and I think the degen behavior in Web3 is influenced by the opportunity to make money, right? So there are things that we may do that are done because we see the opportunity for economic gain. But there are things such as public goods, right? So some of the projects that I would put up there in terms of like being representative of this, it would be like Giveth and Gitcoin, and some would say even Ethereum would be a public good, where these services and projects are facilitating the development of these goods that are available to everyone in the community that aren't necessarily built with the idea of economic gain, but really for like the progress of like the community as a whole, right? The advancement of the community, the technology as a whole. So the regenerative behavior, I think, aligns a little bit to what you were saying in terms of like being an entrepreneur and building for social impact, and less so by the extraction of economic value.
100%. but it's more about the people we're attracting, not entrepreneurs because we want them to get economic gain. It's because really it is a very you, as an entrepreneur yourself, you know the risk you're taking, you know what how you've rolled the dice, and that journey in by itself. Having mentored so many entrepreneurs along the way, there's a lot of economic waste that happens because people feel they're alone. We want, ideally, Utopian Ego's Paradise community is a community that knows that they have a bat phone, that they can reach the people they need to reach, and they got the perks, and we've taken away a load of stuff that they don't need to worry about, and focus on creating value to their communities.
So tell me a little bit about these perks, because I'm, again, looking at my notes here and I see that there's a couple of things that you've written out in terms of life hack perks. Tell me a little bit about them and why that's important to the project.
Okay, I'll actually use a recent story, if you allow me. So I just I came back from a 5-day all-inclusive retreat. And the concept of all-inclusive, I was introduced to it in Punta Cana, and it was brilliant. It was brilliant because I've gone to a lot of trips to kind of get away from the stress, and they've never really worked, because the second, let's say I want to go to Vienna, the second I take out my wallet for any transaction, I'm reminded of all the stress that I've left back home, the salaries I need to pay, the project where it is, where am I on funding, and blah blah blah. You know, it all comes back to you super fast, whether you want it or not. It is a super heavy weight. Being away on an all-inclusive retreat, whether it is a wellness retreat, a yoga retreat, or any kind of retreat where you're not thinking of anything for 5 days, you will come back focused and ready to hit any project with the right mindset. And that's what the kind of perks we want to bring in. What kind of perks can we offer our community that would put them in the right mindset to succeed? Whether it is weekly meditations, yoga retreats, these are all IRL. We want to do peer-to-peer support online, any kind of concierge discounts that we can bring them, whether it is they're going to a country where they don't know anyone, but there's someone there is. That has been a lifesaver for me in all the countries that I've tried to expand my startup in. And having that kind of base where the people can introduce you to people and get you where you need to go much smoother is priceless.
No, there's something to be said about having the right to make this experience much more enjoyable and safe at the same time.
Yes.
So what stage is Ego's Paradise currently? Like what are you all working on, over at the project?
We're done with the drop. We've done a lot of amazing work with Bankless hearts all over. This heart goes out to Bankless, to Decide Themes and the team for bringing us this far. We're done with the smart contract, or we're finalizing all the technical bits. We have a nice education program, because part of what we want to do is we do want to onboard a lot of people onto Web3 who want to understand it with more familiar terms, and that's part of our education agenda as Ego's Paradise.
Wonderful. You're bringing up something that I'm curious if you wouldn't mind kind of diving into it and exploring it just a tad, and that is partnerships in this space.
Yeah,
I think that obviously I think there's value to that. What are your thoughts in terms of what role partnerships play to the success of Web3 projects, and what are maybe some of the things that you should be mindful of as you set out to build a project and start developing some of these relationships with other projects?
So relations with other projects is very interesting. That's something like just putting my international affairs hat. It would be the same as a foreign relations for a community. And I think it's essential that we do not go into, we're building a new economy here, whether it's individually or collectively, and going into more redundant redundancy won't help anyone. So maybe if there are communities like Clinic, I was just checking them out, the Clinic, and they're doing this. They're doing something very similar to empower women founders and entrepreneurs, and so partnerships with like-minded communities is a must if we're going to be building a robust, sustainable ecosystem instead of just competing with the same people about the same perks. So yes, we are going to be building hopefully working on building a lot of partnerships with existing projects, and collectively as a community, we would be beneficial to a lot of these to a lot of existing Web2 platforms who are targeting entrepreneur wellness and are targeting people wellness, mental wellness as a whole. So yes, partnerships is going to be a huge part of what we do.
Tamer, if you wouldn't mind going through a little bit of maybe your thoughts of how you hope to see the project continue to grow and expand and into the future.
Ego's Paradise is the first project for Novajax, which is the company that is building Ego's Paradise. And within Ego's Paradise are a lot of personas. And the way we're looking at these personas, and they're going to be the seed for future projects that we build around, because and what we have in the pipeline are a lot of really cool projects for different sub communities. So basically, Ego's Paradise is the launchpad.
That's wonderful, man. It's good to hear, again, how some of these projects that are being developed within another project, right? So like Bankless Consulting, seeks out and engages projects like Ego's Paradise, and how we can together create a rich, thriving ecosystem with that type of, positive sum, and collaborative mentality. And I guess if there were some final words here, as we get close to the top of the hour, are there any final words that you would like to talk about, either Ego's Paradise or anything else that's in line with the discussion that we've had today?
Again, Ego's Paradise is a place for like people like us, people who are on this call right now. So please join us on Twitter. The community doesn't really actually the community builds itself, but it's the community participation. So please let us know anything that you'd like to see us do, any thoughts that would make this project much better. This is what the project's for. It's for you guys.
And that's a wrap. I enjoyed my chat with Tamer, and I hope you did too. If you'd like to learn more about Ego's Paradise, follow them on Twitter at Ego's Paradise NFT, or go to their website, egosparadise.com. Thanks for listening to Crypto Sapiens. Please give us a follow, like, and a 5-star review wherever you enjoy your podcasts. And stay tuned for our next discussion.